everyone, and welcome to Daily Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by Losico. So, today we will discuss the news articles for 7th and 9th of August, that is for Saturday and today. And please take a note of this that from now on, the newspaper analysis would be available for the amalgamation for Saturday and Monday articles, which would mean that Saturday there would be no newspaper analysis. But yes, do not worry, the articles would not be skipped, and we'll definitely cover them on Monday morning. So this newspaper analysis is presented by me. My name is Isheva Khan. I'm a law graduate, and here at Losico, I'm working as the manager for current affairs vertical. If you wish to connect with me, you can find me on my Twitter as well as LinkedIn handles. The links to these are given in the description box below. With this, let's see what would be the articles that we will discuss. So these are from the previous day, that is Saturday. So the first article would be from the Hindu newspaper, which was titled as South Asia's Emerging Digital Transformation. So in the wake of COVID-19, how the entire South Asia has shifted or has developed into digitalization, or this transformation has taken place, will be discussed in this article. The second one was from the Indian Express, which was titled as Status Check on World Climate. So this talks about the sixth phase of the report from the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So what are the facets of this, or what are the outcomes that have been brought through this report, shall be discussed here. Now, these are the articles that have been picked from today's newspaper. The first one is from the Hindu, which is titled as The Sovereign Right to Tax is Not Absolute. Now, this talks about the power of the government to tax its pupils. And the other thing is that it is not absolute in nature, and what are the limitations we would study over here. And the second one, which we have today, is the Indian Express, which is titled as Securing the Indian Ocean. So this talks about basically mostly the maritime security. How can we develop this, and why is it important for the entire Indian Ocean region will be discussed here. There is a good chance that today's discussion might run a little longer, so kindly hold in with patience with me. So let's see what is the multiple choice question from the previous discussions. Koshi Agreement for Water Management has been signed between the governments of India, and your options are Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, or Myanmar. If you know the answer, you can put it down in the comment section below. This is the descriptive question for the day. Discuss India's policy of security and growth for all in the region, that is SAGAR, and how the Indian Ocean region is important for Indian security. So let's quickly start our discussion for the day and discuss the first article, which talks about the South Asia's emerging digital transformation. Now, as we know that due to the COVID pandemic and the physical or social distancing we are talking about, a lot of systems, a lot of things and transactions have moved to digital setup. So like, for example, the payments have come up digitally, the online education has come up. And in this week, definitely many countries, even if they were not willing to do so, still they have been forced to take a leap in digitalization. And similar has been the case for various South Asian countries as well. So if we talk about the other nations that are even the smaller nations such as Nepal, they've reported a 11% rise in broadband internet users, and India launched National Digital Health Mission to increase the health accessibility and efficiency, and Bangladesh saw 70 to 80% rise in online sales in 2020. And even if we talk about the internet usage that increased in India, so India approximately till the last year had seen approximately 15% of increase in internet consumption. So we can see that the other nations, even if we talk about the smaller ones, they have seen more and more digitalization in their working system. But here, one thing that we need to consider, and something that we cannot really turn our eyes from, is the digital divide that is present in these countries, specifically if we talk about India as well. Now, when we talk about the digital divide, as the name itself is suggesting, it simply means that wherein there is a divide or there is a differentiation amongst the people, amongst the segments of the societies that have the facility of using these digital technologies or internet, and that do not have these facilities. So here we consider that the population of people, the percentage of population without internet. So if we consider it for India, so yes, I'm sure you might be surprised over here, 50% of the citizens, 50% of the population of India does not have the facility of internet. Can you imagine this? That right now also, when we are communicating with each other, this newspaper analysis reaching out to you, we all are making use of internet. Just imagine that half of the population of our country does not even have the access to this basic right of internet. Then, if we talk about Bangladesh and Pakistan, the situation is even worse. As for Bangladesh, this is 59% and Pakistan is 65%. So 51% of the South Asian women are excluded from the social protection measures during the pandemic. Now, this another is a problem. Like, for example, there are the cyber cells, cyber security cells against bullying or maybe sexual harassment or stalking, which are very very primary types of crimes that take place on the internet. But 51% of the South Asian women are even they have not been granted this basic social protection measures during the pandemic. Also, 88% of the children lacked access to internet-powered home schools. So, as we know that in this situation, the education system had also moved online. But yes, of course, they need some kinds of smart gadgets like maybe smartphones, internet connections. So, 88% children over here, they did not have the basic minimal facility of internet-powered home schools. So, this could permanently put the children out of school, place girls at the highest risk of early marriage, increase child labor as well. Now, these things, guys, we have discussed many a times before as well, that how the online education, if it is not imparted equally to every child in the country, so how it can lead to greater and increased cases of child labor, and how the situation is even worse for the girl child, as there are more, likely chances that once the schools reopen also, so they would not be allowed to go back to the schools anymore, and thus they might be pushed into early marriage as well. And if we try to understand about the effect that it had on the businesses, so the firms were failing to embrace e-commerce or other cloud-based technologies which are failing to survive. So the ones, like for example, I'll give you a very practical example. Like Law Seco is an edtech, right? It is an it's an educational firm that uses technology to dissipate its knowledge, right? So these things, or these edtechs, Byju's, for example, Vision IS, all of these things, for example, these were the edtech companies that actually were well equipped with using the technology and e-commerce as well. Now here, if we talk about specifically businesses, then of course e-commerce is one thing that they needed to learn. But here to learn the example is how we survived. But just let's say that, for example, there was a vegetable vendor. Now, do you think that he would be equipped enough that he can get into touch with Big Basket or other Big Bazaar and other kinds of websites, and he could sell his vegetables? Of course not. So definitely, they have had a brand, though the COVID situation was still better for them, as vegetables, they came in under the essentials list, and thus a lot of provisions were made for them to regulate the and also to circulate the or make it available in the societies. But yes, there were a lot of institutions, other kinds of businesses, let's say even cloth market or stuff like that, that actually, in restaurants for example, they faced a lot of problem. So there was 64% decline in sales with small and women-led firms, which were faring the worst. So if you talk about the digital transformation, Singapore, Japan, South Korea they were recognized as global technological hubs. And China's e-commerce industry will reach $3 trillion in 2024, which is very, very huge. The Indian e-commerce could create 1 million jobs by 2030 and worth $200 billion by 2026. And also Pakistan's digital financial sector could boost the GDP by 7%. So the article also talks about a few steps that can be done and taken in this direction. South Asia needs to address firstly the legal, regulatory, and the policy gaps, and also boost the digital skills amongst the people. Secondly, we need to have a robust digital infrastructure that, like India needs, and investment of approximately $35 billion, something that is more up to the date and that can actually walk step in step with the growing technology. And thirdly, we should remove regulatory roadblock in e-commerce, inter-regional trade, and also the currency flows. With this, let's discuss the second article for the day, which talks about the sixth assessment report of the IPCC. We'll take this article into very short as to only what can be new that can be seen in this report. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the IPCC, will release the first part of its sixth assessment report. So let's see what are the most important insights that can be expected out of this report. The first one is the regional focus, which means that it would give more emphasis on a regional assessment, such as the sea level rise in specifically Bay of Bengal, along with the average sea level rise across the world. So basically, regional focus can perhaps give a better idea as to what is a particular region going through when it comes to the climatic problems. Secondly, the extreme events, which means that there would be a bigger focus on extreme weather events linking individual extreme events to climate change. So this would give a greater emphasis on the extreme weather events that took place, and thus the better solutions to them can be found out. Third, the cities, which means that the report is presented specific scenarios, the climate change impacts on various cities and large urban populations and implications for the key infrastructure as well. And fourthly and finally, the synergies, which means that it would present a more integrated understanding of the cross-link evidence and discuss trade-offs between different options or the pathways, and is likely to cover social implications of climate change action by countries. So, wherein a better and more synergized or coherent or cooperative method of climate action can be taken with this report. So let's discuss the third article for the day, which talks about the sovereign right to tax is not absolute. So the Taxation Laws Amendment Bill has been introduced in the Lok Sabha to nullify the regressive 2012 amendments in the Income Tax Act that had overturned the Supreme Court's decision in Vodafone versus Union of India case. Let's see that what is the sovereign right to tax. So there were several ICDS tribunals that had actually recognized the fundamental principle that taxation is an intrinsic element of states' sovereign power. Here, please note that the ISDS tribunals, they basically mean the investor state dispute settlement. So basically, whenever there is any dispute between the state, now the state that we have is the government, and the investor who is investing into any of the programs or any kinds of projects. So here it was recognized that it is the fundamental principle of the state that the taxation is an intrinsic part of the state's sovereign power. As we know that when we talk about the fiscal policy of the government, then taxation is a very important element of it, and taxation indeed is a very important source of money and income for the government too. Now here are some case laws that have given more light on this particular thing. In the case of Isa versus Spain, it was held that the power to tax is a core sovereign power of the state that should not be questioned lightly. In the case of El Paso versus Argentina, it was held that the tax policy of a country is a matter relating to the sovereign power of the state. Renta 4 versus Russia, it was held that to examine the taxation measures for BIT breaches, the starting point should be that the taxation measures are a bona fide exercise of the state's public powers, or basically the sovereign powers. Now, I hope here that you understand the meaning of the sovereign power that we are talking about. Basically, in general sense, sovereign means something that is unaffected by any external power or agency. When we call India in the preamble being a sovereign nation, it means that nobody and nothing that is out of India or any other country, be it any international organization or anything, can affect the decisions that India as a nation has to take, which means that India would be completely unaffected by any kind of international decisions. Now you must be wondering that still have treaties, we are members of various organizations that are international in nature. Yes, of course, but that is something that India itself chooses to do, right? These things cannot be forced upon the country, as we are a sovereign nation and nothing beyond our consent can be done as a nation. So here, this also talks about the sovereign power of the state, that this is the complete power that the state has in itself to do the taxation. Now, here there are limits on the rights, as why we are saying that though it is a sovereign right, but it is not absolute in nature. So this says that the expropriation and fair equitable treatment should be there, and it should not be discriminatory and confiscatory at all, right? And this was held in the case of Encana versus Ecuador. And as we know that, for example, it should not be like from particular kind of business the state is extracting or taking so much of tax, and it is completely exempting any other kind of business. So definitely it should not be discriminatory in nature, and yes, it should amend the laws in a reasonable and proportionate manner as well. So if we talk about the 2012 amendment, which actually, now when this taxation bill is being passed to nullify the regressive 2012 amendments, let's understand that what were these amendments. So it basically made the IT law retroactively applicable on the indirect transfer of Indian assets. Now, when we talk about the retroactive, it means when we have something in the back date. Now, generally, the laws are prospective in nature, which means, like, for example, if today the law has come into being, so from today, or from a date that is set in that particular law, it would be implemented in the coming future. But sometimes the laws are also made retroactive or retrospective in nature, which means that even from back date they can be implemented. So what it did was that it made the IT, that is the information and technology law, income tax law, sorry, retroactively applicable on the indirect transfer of the Indian assets. And this resulted in Vodafone and Kind Energy suing India before investor. Now, I hope that you remember that in the previous year also, but I know it's a long time back. You might not have been listening to these discussions back then. We did the entire Vodafone and the Kind Energy case in very, very much detail when we talked about the right to retrospective taxation. So basically, that it had actually sued India before the Investor State Dispute Settlement Tribunals of India and Netherlands, and India and UK as well. So both the tribunals held that India's retrospective amendments breached fair and equitable treatment provision in the taxation system, bilateral investment treaty, basically. Okay, so then here we need to understand that this was something that was not at all supported at the international ground as well. That you cannot really, tax someone retrospectively, and that is why these new taxation law amendment bill actually it seeks to nullify the 2012 regressive amendment. So finally, India should exercise its right to regulate while being mindful of its international law obligations as well. Because obviously, since as we know that India also depends a lot on the foreign investments that are done in the country, and if at all, we are so unwelcoming and so cold to them, then definitely it will hamper our economic as well as international relations as well. With this, let's discuss the last article for the day, which talks about securing the Indian Ocean. So recently, India has decided to convene an open debate of the United Nations Security Council on enhancing the maritime security. As we now know that India, for the eighth time, has become the non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and now approximately after 10 years, India has got the chance to chair the United Nations Security Council as well. So here, it is actually said that it would focus more on enhancing the maritime security as well. Now, when we talk about the maritime security in and around India, Indian Ocean region is the most important, and the next one is the Indo-Pacific region. But yes, definitely in the close affinity, we have the Indian Ocean region. So basically, it is done to highlight the effective international maritime cooperation to respond holistically to natural as well as man-made threats to the maritime security. Let's understand the background behind this given decision. So there is first definitely the natural interest, which means that India has a coastline of over 7,500 kilometers in the Indian Ocean. And that is why India definitely is very much interested in making its coastline as secure as possible, and even, securing the area as much as till the high sea that we have in the Indian territorial waters. Then, the Indian Ocean region transports 75% of the world's maritime trade and 50% of the daily global oil consumption as well. Because, as we know, even if we talk about India and China, both the countries highly consume oil and other natural sources of energy, and both are not well equipped by themselves to produce these sources of energy, and thus a lot of this energy is supplied from the Middle Eastern region, and thus a lot or a huge trade in the global oil consumption is also taken through this entire route of the Indian Ocean region. So here there were some important events that took place in the Indian Ocean. In 2005, as we know, there was a creation of an Indian Ocean tsunami warning and mitigation system by the United Nations after the 2004 tsunami. I hope I was a very young a kid at that time during the 2004 tsunami, and I know a lot of you would also must have been, and we didn't even understand as to what is tsunami and what has actually happened. But if you remember, there was this entire hustle which was created during the time of 2004, that Sumatra, Java, all of these areas, Indonesia, they were into news, and that some tsunami has occurred and a lot of people have died due to it. So basically, after the 2004 tsunami, the United Nations had brought or created the Indian Ocean tsunami warning and mitigation system. Then, since 2007, it has increased the threat from piracy originating off the coast of Somalia. Now, as we know that Somalia is one country which is there in the Horn of Africa, right? And Somalia is one country which is very much, I would say, it is known negatively for the pirates that are there in Somalia. So the Indian Navy participated in the UNSC mandated 60 country contact group on piracy, and thus it was made, this area or this entire route was made more secure. Now let's see further as to how will this decision help us more as a country that has a stake in the Indian Ocean region. Firstly, it will open the debate that will focus on the application of 1982 UNCLOS, which is basically the United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea, which is the most important convention when it comes to the territorial waters, bringing to the fore new challenges to peace and security, including non-state actors such as terrorists, pirates, criminal gangs engaged in drug trafficking, etc. Secondly, this discussion can become catalyst for reviewing the operational effectiveness of the UNCLOS. When we talk about the operational effectiveness of the UNCLOS, one discussion can never be left behind is of the stake that China claims in the South China Sea. Now, here it says that it does not really follow the UNCLOS, and here in this situation, we should understand as to how much is in the real sense the UNCLOS very much applicable, or what is the real impact, or does it really have any teeth for countries like China or not? And thirdly, it will illustrate the increasing role of private sector in the maritime domain. For example, shipping, sustainable development through blue economy, that is through fisheries, etc., or provide submarine fiber optical cables, like recently we had for Andaman and Nicobar Islands, as well as for Lakshadweep Islands as well. So, sustaining the international cooperation requires an effective legal policy framework underpinning a rule of the law based approach. And that is why it is really important, and it really means good significance when it is said that the maritime cooperation is given a say in the United Nations Security Council discussions as well. So, if you want to catch the same discussion on the podcast, so you can definitely join our daily newspaper analysis podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google, as well as Anchor Podcast. So, definitely go and listen to it. It is available in both Hindi and English. Also, if you wish to download the PDF of today's slides, you can participate in our test prep Losico Telegram channel. The link to this channel is also available in the description box below, or you can simply scan this QR code that you can see on your screens right now. Also, for other crisp and amazing content for your exam prep, do not forget to follow us on our official Instagram channels for Judiciary, CLAT Prep, and UGC Net if you're preparing for any of these exams. If you like the session, do give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe to our channels. Thank you so much.